Morning, guys. It's Sunday morning, the 1st of March. Beautiful day, I guess. The temperature's not too bad. It's 33. And when you look outside here, you can see that we've lost pretty much snow over the past couple days just from the sun absorbing it. So, got a squirrel out there eating yet. And it seems like it's supposed to go up to 40, I believe they said on the news today. I don't know. I'm so disgusted with the winter. I hope that all the snow goes away and it turns into spring as soon as possible. So I've never seen spring here before May, so I'm not expecting it. But anyway, there's 2 more months, so 60 more days of this nonsense. Oh, you can really feel that heat coming through the glass of the sun shining in there. This is direct due south here. You know, it's amazing how nature takes care of herself so well. Yesterday there was ice on that entire kiln. Now there's none on it, and I'll bet you the temperature is probably, it looks to me like it's about 80 in the kiln from here. So that's a good thing. Actually, I just got the dog and it's 90 in there, so it's higher than 80. Wonderful. I read an article when I was a kid, and it's hard to see this in the sun right now, that said that if in snow and the snow wasn't very thick, the deer tracks had drag marks that it was a buck. Now, I don't know where this deer is. It's already gone, but I'm just saying there's some drag marks there. The snow's only about 3/4 of an inch thick here because I plowed here once. So, possibly, I don't know for sure. Hey YouTube. So, I'd gotten a couple comments about how you actually price the sawmill and stuff. And what I'm going to tell you is, I used to do lectures in 4th year college, so the seniors, on this subject. And the subject was broken down in ways that you could easily use it. It can become very complicated because there's a lot of formulas that you can use with this. But the formulas don't really give you a whole lot of great information, but they do give you some precise information. But anyway, what I wanted to talk about, and I talked about this once before. So, okay, you have your sawmill, and you want to start charging for the sawmill. Now, if you've never been in business before, but you have a sawmill, this is probably the thing you should hear, what I'm about to tell you. So, anyway, let's say you're driving down the road, you look off the road and you see a construction site. What do you actually see there? Okay, so here's what I'm going to tell you. I call this thing the 4 M's because it's easy for me to remember it that way, and sometimes I still forget. But anyway, the 4 M's. So I look on a construction site, I see people, so that's manpower. All right, so if you're beginning to figure out how to run your business, write some of this down. So manpower, then you look on the site and you see machinery, okay? And then in order to build or produce something, you have to have what? You have to have materials. Okay, so materials. And then the one thing that involves all of these things, but you can still keep separate, is money. So manpower, materials, machinery, and money. Okay, those are the 4 M's. And those are the things that you need to keep track of when you're figuring out your business. Your sawmill is machinery. The operator of the sawmill and the kid stacking the wood, or the man stacking the wood, whoever it is part of the manpower. So The machinery is the sawmill, the machinery is the, if you use a tractor like I use, that's part of the machinery. If you use something else, you know, and it needs everyday things like fuel and stuff, that's machinery. Okay, so then the other thing would be material. So when it comes to the sawmill, the material is the logs themselves. So you're selling wood, especially if you're the one cutting the wood down, or if you're buying logs and have them delivered to you, you're buying the material. Okay, so and then there's money, and I'll explain the money part of this last, because it's kind of, it's not the hardest, but it's, you know, got more things involved in it, I think. Alright, so in any business, the name of the game is to make a profit. It's not to break even, okay? If you've never been in business before and you do a job and you have $100 in your wallet and you have nothing to do with it because everything is paid, that sounds nice, but unless you've covered all these bases, you may find yourself broke when it comes to paying for them. And I'll give you a for instance. Sometimes somebody will say to me, if I cut firewood on my own property for heat costs me nothing. Well, that's not really true, because first of all, you have machinery, which is the sawmill and the tractor to drag the logs around. Second, you have manpower, which is yourself, to do the cutting of the trees, okay? The trees themselves are the material, and it takes money to get that stuff going. You can't run the chainsaw without gas, and you have to have money to buy gas. So it's that simple. You got to put those things together. The problem with it is when you have something bigger than just a sawmill and a tree, when you have the chainsaw, the sawmill, a backhoe, and maybe a tractor for pulling carts of wood around, or however you do it, you have to be able to allow for all that stuff, because somebody has to pay for that, okay? And think of it this way. If you have a cart and you use it to drag the wood around, and after 3 years the tires on the cart go flat, somebody has got to pay for those tires. So you have to consider those tires in with machinery costs, just like you would figure, like say for my backhoe, I need to figure fuel every day, motor oil, I need to figure, you know, transmission fluid when you need it. You need to figure antifreeze as you need it. And then you break those things down into how often you need them. Like if you need fuel every day, then you have to allow for fuel every day. You have to charge the people that you work for fuel for every day. You cannot say that that's my own bill, because if you do say that, then that means if you charge $30 an hour for labor, you now have to charge, you know, if you're using 50 gallons of fuel a day, you have to charge an additional 50 gallons times whatever the price of diesel fuel is. Excuse me. I had a really good supper, but it's giving me the hiccups. And a little bit of gas. So anyway, when you look at those 4 items, those 4 M's, what you want to do is get yourself a piece of paper, just right at the top, 4 M's. The first one, manpower. Write down all the men you think you need to make this thing work. Okay, so with the sawmill, you need somebody to run the sawmill. You need somebody to move the lumber, okay? And basically, if you're running like an LT15, that should be about it, because you're not cutting so fast that you're really needing somebody to separately to load logs or whatever. So let's say you need 2 people. Okay, if you charge $30 an hour for yourself, and you can charge whatever you want. I don't care if you charge 10, it's up to you. But if you charged $30 an hour for you and $5 an hour for your helper, and it doesn't matter if you charge 15 an hour and 50 an hour for the other guy. The point is whatever you charge, especially in labor, you should actually be charging an additional 30% because of taxes and stuff. And since I've done taxes, it may have gone up. Now with Trump in there, I think it may have gone down slightly. But regardless, the best thing to do is to figure out what that is by doing, going to your tax things and seeing what you pay for your taxes for yourself. And as a businessman, you don't necessarily want to start this right away, but sooner or later you're going to have to pay different taxes, that normally you would not pay. So you're going to have to find out what the percentage of taxes is per dollar of, the money you pay for wages, and add that in. Now, I know that if you bought a sawmill and all you care about is cutting lumber for yourself, then this might not apply to you. And if you're going to cut lumber for your neighbors, or if a bunch of neighbors bought a sawmill and they just want to be able to have it to cut with, the point is even if a bunch of neighbors bought it and you don't want to charge anybody, somebody has to pay for blades, somebody has to pay for gas, somebody has to pay for oil, somebody has to pay for saw blades. It's that simple. And all those things get used no matter who's running it. Whether you own it or don't own it, it still gets used. So if I buy myself a sawmill and I'm going to cut a tree down and cut it into boards, yes, the boards are mine, the log is mine, the tree is mine, and everything else is mine. However, so is the bill for the chainsaw, to fuel the chainsaw, the time it took me to do it, and all those other things. And those are the things that sometimes we forget to charge for, and that's why I see guys driving around as contractors with beat up pickup trucks. They can't afford another truck, they can't afford more new tools, and it's simply because they did not charge for the ones they have. And if you don't charge for the ones you have, you are getting nowhere. Alright? You have got to be able to have people pay in your business for all the things you use to produce whatever you're producing. Alright, so let's get back to the 4 M's. So I talked a little bit about manpower. So with manpower you want to add at least 30% to that bill, whatever it is, so that you can pay taxes on that. Now that's just my own opinion. You need to look this up to find out what it actually is. Alright, so you've determined how many men you need and all that stuff. They're going to work so many hours a day. Now we're going to go from that to machinery. We need to figure out how much gas the sawmill uses, how much antifreeze it uses. Well, I guess the sawmill doesn't use antifreeze, but not the LT15, but gas, motor oil, filters, okay? You need to figure that, and you also need to give yourself a rough idea of how much you can cut with a blade before you need a new blade. Now, if you sharpen blades, you may be able to save yourself money, maybe you won't. It all depends on what's happening. Now, I had talked about a year or so ago to somebody online, and I had made the comment that I usually charge $30 an hour to do whatever I do. And the point is that's true, but, when it comes to sharpening blades, if I have some downtime, I can sharpen a blade and I don't have to charge $30 an hour for it. I can do it after hours if I want to. But technically, if I'm going to charge for the things that I need for the sawmill, then somebody needs to pay for that $30 an hour sharpening or whatever it takes me to do it. Because when they take a blade off of a sawmill and they sharpen it, whether they sharpen it in-house or send it out, it still gets charged. There's a charge to that, so somebody has to pay for that. Same thing, like I say, with fuel, saw blades, motor oil, whatever you're going to use, transmission fluid for the guide rollers on the LT15, anything that you're going to be replacing on a regular basis needs to be figured in there. Okay, and it doesn't even have to be a regular basis. Like, what is regular to you? If regular is every day and not every month, you're confusing yourself. Regular means consistently. So in other words, like maybe the motor oil I'll change every 2 months, or maybe I'll change the motor oil every month. Maybe I'll put transmission fluid on the guide rollers that roll the carriage maybe every 3 months. I don't know. It depends on how they act, whether it rains or not and washes the oil out. So those are the things you have to consider. With that, let's say for the machinery, like I say, you think about the backhoe as well. If your backhoe, let's say your backhoe has a drip of some sort, say hydraulic oil, somebody has to pay for that until you fix the freaking leak. They're going to pay for the fixing of the leak, and they're going to pay for the leak while it's leaking. Okay, because the money doesn't come out of the sky. It has to come from somewhere. And if it comes from your pocket, you are going to be broke. You have got to be able to do the best you can do, charge the best prices you can, and get everything paid for, so that next year, if the sawmill breaks down or you need twice as many saw blades, you have them. You have what you need to make the repair. Okay? Like my backhoe, in the past 3 years, the backhoe has needed a new water pump. It has needed a new a valve, which I don't know if you remember on my videos 2 years ago, I think it was, I took the head off and had to replace a valve in there. So I needed that, which took, time and effort. But all that has to be charged up to the people buying the lumber off you, or people that are getting lumber cut. And the way you work this is, if it's your lumber, you charge for the lumber, you charge for the, the log that you cut and stuff, and the cutting of that, if you're the one who cut it. Or if you buy the lumber, you add something to the price you paid for the lumber, not the lumber, for the log, and then you cut it up. It's your log now, it's in your kiln, and that's another thing. The kiln is another item that you have to charge for, because the kiln uses some electricity to run the fans. Okay, so and even the building of the kiln. Like, let's say the kiln costs you, $1,000 or $2,000, and the kiln say it's going to last you, say, 5 years before it needs to be rebuilt, or 10 years, however long you think. Add that in. Divide 2,000 by 10 years. You might have to add some interest to that and stuff because of the change in money, and that's where the calculations come in that you can use with this stuff. But the point is it'll give you a good idea of what you should be doing with the money you get. So in other words, like, say you make $500 a day or $5,000 a day, it doesn't matter. You have to know how much of that is money is your pay. You have to know how much of that goes towards a savings account for part repairs or fuel oil or whatever. Okay, and then, like, let's go to the material part. In the sawmill, the material is going to be the logs, because the logs are the thing that make the product that you need to work with. So, when it comes to pricing that out, it's pretty simple. If you buy logs, just add a percentage to it before you cut them, figure out all the cutting, and then whatever it is, it is. The other day, somebody had mentioned to me that they were paying 25 cents for rough cut lumber, and I do not see a problem with that. 35 cents is cheap for hardwood. Think about this. A board foot of red oak, which is hardwood, down at Lowe's is $8. A board foot. That's for one 12 by 12 1-inch thick piece of wood. So somebody's getting plenty of money for this. Okay, and you have to be the one to get that money as well. Now, if you want to charge $1 or $2 less, and you can, because it's your own oak, and you do that and make the sale that Walmart or that Kmart doesn't, not Kmart, Lowe's doesn't make, then you're doing better. So it's all up to you. You don't have to charge what somebody else charges, because they have bills you may not have. Okay, and then with this, like, say there may be something there. Let's see, money. When it comes to the money part, so we went through manpower, machinery, and materials with the sawmill. So now we're going to go, into money. So when it comes to money, money could be as simple as having, a couple $1,000 or $1,000 to pay for your first load of oak, or it could be the money you need to buy the sawmill. Nobody says you have to buy the sawmill without borrowing money. You can borrow money to buy a sawmill. So, borrowing the money, how much you pay in interest, how much it costs you down the line, that's all part of what you should be charging. One of the biggest things that I see people do, and I have to laugh at this, people will say to me, I only paid $15,000 for my house when I was 20 years old. So I'm selling my house now for $80,000. Okay, but did you add up all the interest? Because years ago the interest rates were 6%, as high as 18%. So are you adding all that interest in there? Because most people don't. They look at the bottom line and they think for some reason that none of the interest, none of the insurance costs, none of your tax costs matter. And they do matter because it's money that's spent that you're not getting back unless you charge when you sell the house to get that. And that's how it is with the lumber. If you don't charge everything that it costs you to get the lumber, I don't know how in the world you're going to be able to pay for it. So just listen. Now, because the lumber mill is basically outside and it's not in an office, and it can be a building, and if you're in a building, then you have to charge for that building, okay? And you may want to charge for the building in a separate category where you're charging like what it costs to operate the building and the sawmill per day. But that's up to you. I'd rather do it by the board foot because it makes it easier for the other guy to figure out about how much money he's going to owe you. Okay, so these are things, like I said, that you have to know about, and you have to sit down and fill out all the things that you use to be able to pay for them. Now let's say you have a cell phone. Let's say your cell phone you use only for your business. So in other words, it's people telling you, I got logged for sale. It's people telling you how much they want to buy, you know, what they need. Can you come and look at this, at that, the other thing. Somebody has to pay for your phone. Now, if you're figuring your phone in your wages, there's nothing wrong with that. You can do that. But just so you understand that if not only you need a phone, but you're going to give your helper a phone, and you have maybe some other people working and you give them phones so that you can keep in touch, you have to realize that those phones need to be paid for. Somehow they need to be paid for, and if it's within the wages of the person, that's fine. I know for me, I am not paying for a telephone with my wages that someone else's, you know, when it's someone else's phone. If it's my phone, then that's different, but I'm not going to keep it on me all the time just to satisfy my boss who wants to be able to talk to me every 5 minutes. So, you know, it all depends on how you want to look at things. I'm just saying that as a business person, you should have everything figured out that you need to run your business. So, I don't know if you have any questions about this or anything. If you do, ask them in the comments. And if you want me to, I'll go further with this thing so that we can actually, you know, pinpoint this a little better. But if you really want to know more about this, go back through my videos. I have spreadsheets in there that you can print out, use the spreadsheet, fill in all the numbers, and come up with some really good numbers for charging for stuff. Okay? You don't have to charge $8 a board foot for red oak, depending upon how you got it and how long it takes to cut it. But you may have to charge more if you're not too good at cutting it and you're, you know, buying it from somebody who's ripping you off. So you want to look into that. It's the same thing, like people don't realize that framing lumber is actually the cheapest lumber you can buy, but it costs the same amount to cut it. If you cut framing lumber into 2x4s or 1x12, it doesn't cost any less to cut 1x12 red oak out of the same, you know, out of logs and get the same size lumber. So you have to realize there's an equal value there. So the problem with framing lumber is the price of pine is a lot lower than the price of hardwood. So that's, you know, some of the issues here that you have to deal with. There's times, depending upon who you're dealing with, that maybe the person will pay a good $8 for high-priced stuff. In other words, maybe all quarter sawn material. If everything you supply to them is quarter sawn, they may be willing to pay $8 a board foot. If it's not, maybe they won't. If you're going to plane the wood, you know, to a certain exact dimension for them and deliver it at a certain moisture content, they may be willing to pay a little extra. Okay, it all depends. Because when I go down to Lowe's and I check out the moisture content in their wood, it varies all over the place. I mean, red oak is not always 6 or 8% when you go down to Lowe's. Depends on how long it's sat there. Because when they have their doors wide open in the summertime and it's raining outside, they're bringing humidity and moisture into the building. So I've checked their 2x4s many times, and they're 19%. Okay? Now Lowe's sells a lot of stuff, so their wood is moving quickly, so it's not like it sits there for 6 months and, you know, it does nothing but gain moisture. But these are the things that happen, and you need to have a good place to store it. If you're going to cut lumber into boards and store it outside, I'm not saying that you can't do that, because you can air dry stuff. What I am saying is you can't expect to get as much for that as somebody who kiln dries it and then planes it to a certain dimension so that you have good wood that you want to do the project you're going to do. Same thing with molding. Like, you know, I have a molding cutter, and if I want to use that, I have to add the molding cutter in as machinery. I need a man to run it or 2 men to run it, and, you know, this is how you figure out the prices of stuff, whatever it costs. And don't forget little things that are included in on that. Okay, like I say, a lot of times people forget their cell phones. They forget sometimes the electricity that they're actually using in the building. You know, how much electricity do I use in the garage compared to how much electricity do I use when I'm building something? That's one of the reasons why when I go in my garage in the morning, every day, 7 days a week, all the lights in my garage are lit. Why do I light them? For one reason. Because I want the dog to have light in there so he don't get goofy. But I also learned from having a lumber yard that when you light all the lights, and then let's say on rainy days you come in there and you're cutting and nailing and you're using a compressor and all kinds of other tools, the price of the electricity goes up. You can see it right away in the electric bill, and you know what it costs per day or hour to charge for things like that. Okay? So that's just some of the things I'm saying that you have to look at. So when it comes to the sawmill, you know, as a machinery, you have to look at the sawmill itself. You have to look at everything that makes the sawmill run, how often you need that. You should probably add in a chainsaw here, because how are you going to cut off the limbs that are sticking out or bad spots in the logs? Those are the things that you have to be able to put down to start figuring out how much to charge. Okay? As far as your labor goes, if you want to even sit down and figure that out, you know, if you're doing this and you're retired and you don't need to have the money from it too much, charge $10 an hour, and I'll tell you what, that's going to beat a lot of the prices of lumber from everybody else. Now, I'm not saying that I would do that, but I'm just saying you could do that. So, alright guys, well, that's enough for today with the 4 M's. But remember the 4 M's, okay? The 4 M's are really important in business, no matter what kind of business you have, okay? Machinery, materials, manpower, and money. Now, the only thing I'll say yet quick before I finish is when it comes to the money, you have to be able to make a profit on what you're doing, okay? And depending, like, if you put money in the bank today, you're hardly getting anything from a CD. You don't get very much from savings accounts. So if you're charging 15% profit on everything you're doing, fine. If you're charging 25%, that's better. It's up to you how much you can get as a profit. But the profit should be there, and the profit should be taken and either invested into your company by buying a bigger sawmill or more logs or more blades or something that's going to help you to produce more at a lower cost, okay? Or do more even at the same cost, but it's always better if you can do more at a less cost. So, alright guys, that's it for that so far. Like I say, if you have more questions, I can take this as far as you want. It used to be a whole course, which was about 4 months in school, to go over all these things. So there's a lot of stuff that can be gone over. I'm not going to be giving away, or shouldn't say it like that. I'm not going to be working on my school stuff every night here on the computer, because I've already done that and I retired from it and I don't want to do it anymore. But I am giving you some really good, helpful advice here on how to make money so that you don't go broke trying to run your sawmill. Now, you also have to realize that when you're getting started, it may take time to get this all together. You may have to have enough of your own personal money to last for 3 years till you actually get a good thing going. Okay? I mean, you know for a fact that the first kiln dried wood isn't going to come out of the kiln for at least 1 month. Okay, so you got to remember that. Now, if you're gonna, and you know, you also have to remember to put some kiln wood away, get kiln dried, put some air dried wood away so that you have something to sell. That's the whole point. But it may take time for this to happen. It might take 3 months, it might take 3 years. One guy was saying in the comments that people bring him logs all the time to cut and you don't even pay for them. Fine, if that's what you have. If you're a likable person and people are bringing you stuff, then you don't really have to charge for what it would cost you to go do the bringing or the payment for the wood. But nonetheless, it would be better if you charge something for it. Because if you don't, when it comes time for you to have to go get it yourself, and the time will come, then you're going to have to all of a sudden up your prices. So anyway, guys, like I say, that's, you know, some good advice. You can take it any way you want to. I'm sure there'll be people out there who complain about what I've said, but I don't worry about people who don't know anything. What I'm trying to tell you is this is what you have to start to think of before you can go into business and make the business last. Have a good one.